My best friend sabotaged my wedding, and my guests applauded her for it. I want to tell you about the 6 seconds between when she said what she said and when the applause started, because those 6 seconds contained the full arc of my understanding of what my wedding was and was not, and what the room had been seeing that I had been refusing to see. The officiant had reached the portion where she asked if anyone had any objections. Nobody speaks during this portion. The officiant moves on. This was not how our wedding worked. My best friend Dana was my maid of honor. She had been my best friend for 14 years. She had met Marcus 3 years before the wedding and had told me 6 months into the relationship that she had concerns. I asked her not to share them. She said, okay. She had not said a word for 2.5 years. She had not said a word at the rehearsal dinner. She had not said a word that morning while she helped me with my dress. The officiant asked if anyone had any objections. Dana said, I do. The room went the specific quiet of people who had been attending an ordinary wedding and had just received information that it was not going to remain ordinary. Dana was standing behind me with her flowers in her hands and her face doing something I had not seen before, the face of someone who had been holding something for a long time and had decided that holding was no longer the correct strategy. She did not look at me. She looked at the officiant. She said, I have one thing to say, and then I will sit down. Claire has a right to know. 3 weeks ago, Marcus met with his ex-girlfriend for dinner and did not tell Claire. I know because Claire's cousin saw them and told me, and I asked Marcus about it, and Marcus asked me not to tell Claire. I am telling Claire now. Then she sat down. The 6 seconds began. I looked at Marcus. His face did something I had been watching it do for 3 years without understanding what I was watching. The face of a person who had been caught and was running through possible explanations in order of decreasing plausibility and had not yet landed on one. I looked at Dana. She was sitting with her flowers in her lap looking at the floor. She had delivered what she had come to deliver. I looked at the guests. They were looking at me. And what they were looking at me with was not the expression of people witnessing a dramatic scene. It was the expression of people who had been watching something they had wanted to say something about and were now relieved that someone had said it. I thought about the specific Thursday 3 weeks ago, when Marcus said he was working late and came home at 10 p.m. slightly too cheerful. I thought about the 2.5 years of Dana having concerns she had not shared. I thought about Dana's face that morning when she was helping me with my dress. She had looked tired. I had asked if she was okay. She had said yes. She had been deciding. The applause started. It did not start as applause. It started as one person in the third row clapping once quietly, then another, then another. The clapping spread in the specific way of applause that was not organized. It was the clapping of people who had been holding the same opinion Dana had been holding and were now hearing it said out loud. The clapping was for Dana. I could see Marcus's face understanding that the clapping was for Dana. I turned around. I faced the room. I did the thing I did not know I was going to do until I did it. I clapped 4 times, slowly, looking at Dana. Dana looked up. Her face did something complicated. She understood what I was doing. I was not clapping for the sabotage. I was clapping for the 14 years. I was clapping for the best friend who had carried information for 3 weeks and concerns for 2.5 years and had stood up at my wedding and said the thing she had been asked not to say because not saying it was the worst option. I turned to Marcus. I said, we need to talk. He said, Claire, please. I said, not here. Go with Dana and my father to the back office. I need them with you because I do not trust myself alone with you, and I do not trust you alone with any other member of my family. I will be there in 10 minutes. He said, the ceremony. I said, there is no ceremony. There is not going to be a ceremony today. In the bride's dressing room, I took off my shoes. I thought about Marcus asking Dana not to tell me, about the specific nature of the ask, which told me Marcus had understood the dinner was something he would not want me to know about, and had made a calculation about managing the information. I thought about how many other calculations he had been making in 3 years. In the back office, Marcus told me everything. It took 2 hours. The ex, the dinner, other dinners, the calculations, the asks. When he was done, I said, if Dana had not stood up today, would you have told me any of this? He was quiet. He said, I don't know. I said, I think you do know. He said, no. I said, that is the answer. You are going to marry me without telling me. I cannot marry you. He cried. I did not cry. My father Ron put his hand on my shoulder. I went out to the reception hall. The guests were still there. I said, thank you for coming. There is not going to be a wedding today. There is going to be a party. I have catering and a dance floor and a best friend who deserves every single one of you to tell her she did the right thing. Please stay. Please eat the food. Please dance. Please thank Dana. Many stayed. Dana danced with my father. Dana danced with my grandmother Elisabetta. Dana danced with me. We ate the cake. We drank the champagne. Marcus left. 3 days later, I was at Ron's house. I had not looked at my phone in 2 days. I had been sleeping and eating toast and sitting on the back porch. Ron brought me coffee. He said, he's been calling me too. I said, how many times? Ron said, 11. I opened the drawer. 42 messages from Marcus. The first ones were apologetic. The messages of a man trying to say the right combination of words to undo it. The middle messages were the messages of a man who had been apologizing for 2 days without a response and was starting to feel the silence as something being done to him rather than something he had earned. He said this was not fair. He said he deserved a chance to explain. The last messages were angry. The final one said, you owe me a conversation. I gave you 2 hours. You can give me 10 minutes. I read it 3 times. He was framing the 2 hours as something he had given me rather than something I had demanded. Even now, he was restructuring what happened so that the debt was mine. That afternoon, my cousin Priya called. She called the house phone, which told me she had been trying a channel she thought I might answer. She said, Marcus called me. He asked me to tell you the dinner with Caprice was about closure. He said Caprice reached out and he felt he owed her a conversation. He didn't tell you because he knew you would misunderstand. I listened to the construction. Caprice reached out to him. He owed her a conversation. I would misunderstand. Every piece designed to make the dinner his obligation and my reaction the problem. I said, did he ask you not to tell me he called you? Priya went quiet long enough that I knew the answer. She said, yes. 3 days after the wedding that did not happen because he had asked someone to keep something from me. He was on the phone asking someone else to keep something from me. The pattern was not something he did under pressure. It was how he operated. The system. Identify the person closest to me. Give them information designed to reshape the story. Ask them not to tell me they had been contacted. Manage the flow. Control the narrative. I said, if he calls you again, you tell me. That is the one rule. The next morning the doorbell rang. Ron answered. I heard Marcus's voice. He said, I just need 5 minutes. Ron said, she does not want to see you. Marcus said, with respect, sir, that is for her to decide. The reasonable voice. The voice that made the thing he was saying sound like a fair request that only an unreasonable person would refuse. Marcus said, I made a mistake. One mistake. And Dana turned it into a public execution. I deserve a chance to explain myself to the woman I love. I stood in the hallway and listened to the construction. One mistake erased the other dinners and the asks. Public execution made Dana the aggressor. The woman I love made this about his feelings rather than my information. Ron said, you had 2 hours. What did not get covered in 2 hours that 5 minutes will fix? Then Marcus said, I think Dana has been poisoning Claire against me for years. Dana was waiting for her moment. I stepped into the doorway. Marcus saw me. His face did the calculation thing, the quick flicker behind the eyes. I said, Dana did not poison me against you. Dana gave me information. You gave me silence. Those are not the same thing. His face went strategic soft. He said, Claire, please, I love you. We can work through this. I said, you sent flowers with a card that said, you know me. You do not know me. You knew the version of me that did not have all the information. That version does not exist anymore. Something shifted. Not soft, not strategic. Anger. The kind that comes from a person who has tried every tool in the system and is watching them all fail. He said, so that's it? 14 years of friendship outweighs 3 years of us? I said, 14 years of truth outweighs 3 years of management. Yes. He stood there. He looked at Ron behind me. Ron said nothing. The silence was enough. Marcus left. I watched the walk of a man who had come to a door expecting it to open, the way doors always opened for him, and found it closed. That afternoon, I drove to Dana's apartment. She opened the door before I knocked. She had been watching from the window. I sat on the couch we had sat on 100 times over 14 years. I said, tell me about the concerns. Dana took a breath. The breath of someone who had been waiting for this question for a very long time. She said, 6 months in, I saw how he talked about your friends when you weren't in the room. He would say small things. Your college friend was a bad influence. Your coworker was too close. He would plant these little seeds about the people around you and then act surprised when you started pulling away from them. Something cold settled in my chest. Because I remembered pulling away. I remembered thinking those were my decisions. I remembered thinking I had just grown apart from people the way adults do. She said, a year in, I noticed he always knew where you were. Not because you told him, because he checked. He would text me asking if you were with me when you told him you were somewhere else. Not because he was worried, because he was tracking whether your story matched. I said, you're telling me he was monitoring me. Dana said, I'm telling you he was managing you the way he manages everything, quietly, with systems. The word systems. The same word I had used in my own head at 2 in the morning. We had arrived at the same word independently. She said, the dinner with Caprice 3 weeks before the wedding was different. That was not a concern. That was a fact. When I asked Marcus about it, he did not deny it. He said it was nothing and asked me to let it go. She said, and I looked at him and I thought, she is about to marry this man in 3 weeks and he is asking me to let it go. And I could not let it go. I said, how many people knew things about Marcus that I didn't know? Dana said, more than you want to hear right now. I said, I filed things. The Thursday he came home too cheerful, the way he went quiet when Caprice's name came up. I filed all of it and told myself I was being paranoid. Dana said, you were not being paranoid. You were being managed. Managed. The pulling away from friends, the checking through Dana, the dinner, the asks to keep quiet, the flowers with the card, all of it was the system. And I had been inside it for 3 years calling it love, because from the inside, management and love can look the same thing if you are not paying attention. Then Dana told me what Marcus said to her 3 weeks ago when she confronted him about the dinner. He told her she was jealous. He told her she had always wanted me to be alone. He told her if she told me, it would prove she was the toxic one. I said, what did you say? Dana said, I said I would rather be the toxic one than the quiet one. I sat with that. Marcus's pattern in its purest form. Find the person with the information. Tell them a story about themselves that turns sharing it into something selfish. Make truth look like jealousy. Make honesty look like sabotage. And Dana heard all of it and stood up anyway. In front of my father. In front of my grandmother. In front of 200 people. I said, I need to say something to you and I need you to hear it. Dana sat still. I said, you carried this for 2.5 years. You carried concerns you were not allowed to share because I asked you not to. You carried Marcus looking you in the face and telling you that telling me would prove you were toxic. You carried all of that and you still stood up. And I need you to know I understand what that cost you. I understand you could have lost me. And I understand you did it anyway because you loved me more than you were afraid of losing me. Dana's face did the complicated thing again. The same crumple and hold from the ceremony. She said, that morning when I was helping you with your dress, I almost talked myself out of it. I thought maybe it was one dinner. Maybe it meant nothing. And then you asked me if I was okay. And I looked at your face and I thought, she trusts me. She has trusted me for 14 years. And I cannot stand next to her while she makes a vow to a man who asked me to lie to her. I took her hand. I said, you gave me back my life in 6 seconds. Dana said, you gave me back my best friend in 4 claps. We sat there. We did not need to say anything else. 3 weeks later, I moved into my own apartment. Dana helped me unpack. Ron built me a bookshelf. Elisabetta sent a card that said, the bravest women in our family are the ones who walk away from the wrong thing and toward the right people. Priya stopped by with groceries. Marcus did not call anymore. I put a photo on the new bookshelf, not from the ceremony, from the party after. Dana is dancing with Elisabetta. Dana's shoes are off. Elisabetta is laughing. I am in the background watching them and I am smiling. I do not remember smiling in that moment, but the photo says I did. I look at it every morning. I think about the 6 seconds and the applause and the fact that the best day of my life was the day my wedding did not happen. Dana would say that is funny. Dana would be right.